Most Canadians agree that the carbon tax is hurting both families and business owners. Has the tax become Prime Minister Justin Trudeau's biggest nightmare? A new poll suggests that the majority of Canadians want to see the carve-out expanded to include all forms of home heating. There's also a push to exempt farms and food. Now, to chat about this in more detail is political columnist Brian Lilley, who joins us once again from Toronto. Brian, is Trudeau ruining the day he messed with his own tax?
He must be. He must be ruining the day he messed with his own tax because, look, the government didn't seem like it was going to budge on the carbon tax. Pierre Poilievre was having a field day campaigning against it and, finding supporters who were going to move over to his side anyway, but it wasn't hurting them the way it is now. And then back on July 1st, they brought in the carbon tax in Atlantic Canada in the same way it had been applied in other parts of the country, like Alberta, like Ontario, and gas shoots up. There's months of controversy. And then in October 26th, just a month after his environment minister had said, no, we can't have special carve-outs, they have a special carve-out. So he's got people across the rest of the country saying, you've got to do this for us. And they're saying no again. But as you say, 72%. This was a poll by Abacus Data for the Toronto Star, which said, oh no, everyone wants the same special treatment that you're giving to Atlantic Canada. We'll see if he budges on that. I mean, they voted against it last week, of course, but we'll see if they do end up budging or if there's other areas where they're going to have to budge, like this new bill that's, well, not exactly new, but this bill that's now before the Senate that Pierre Poilievre is putting the big push on.
Yeah, let's chit-chat a bit about that bill. C-234, Brian, to expand and exempt farm machinery and fuels from the carbon tax. Tell me more about the bill and if it actually has a chance of passing.
It does have a chance of passing. I don't think the Prime Minister's office wants it to pass. And, there's lots of talk of phone calls from the PMO to senators to try and delay the vote, to try and, ensure it doesn't pass. But this is a bill that passed the House of Commons back in March. Was introduced by Ben Lobb. He's a Conservative MP from Huron area. So there's a fair bit of agriculture in Ben Lobb's riding. And he said, you know what, let's expand what's exempt in farms to include more machinery. So your tractors and your combines, let's exempt their fuels. And that includes gasoline, diesel, light oil for certain functions, propane, and very important, natural gas for grain bin dryers. So, this would be a major carve out. But again, back to Stephen Guilbeault, the environment minister, who at the end of September was saying no special carve outs. Well, after they announced that they're doing the special carve-out for home heating oil, he's now saying there will be no more exemptions as long as I'm environment minister. So you could almost see Pierre Poilievre's glee when he was talking about launching a campaign to back the passing of Bill C-234, because he was saying, if this passes, we won't have Stephen Guilbeault as environment minister anymore. He says he'll resign. So, will it pass? Very possibly. And some Liberals are openly saying, oh, this isn't a big deal. Pierre Poilievre's just, data mining. He's just getting people to sign a petition so he can get your information. But this is going to pass anyway. So Liberals are even talking about it passing now. Will the government proclaim it? Will they bring it into force? I don't know. But, if this goes through, then yes, it does make life easier for farmers. Presumably down the road, it would make food less expensive.
Right.
One story that Poilievre likes to tell is about the greenhouse in his riding that is charged a carbon tax for putting CO2 into the greenhouse where they grow tomatoes. And that drives up the price compared to the Mexican tomatoes that are trucked in from across the continent.
Brian, let's circle back to Environment Minister Stephen Guilbeault for just a moment. I saw a video recently that went viral on social media where he admitted that he's a socialist. Did he ever receive any backlash as a result of that?
Well, from people who don't like socialists, yeah. But, there's no reprimand. And it shouldn't be shocking that people in a Trudeau cabinet would call themselves socialist. I've said for a long time, this is not your grandfather's or your father's or your uncle's Liberal Party. This is a very different Liberal Party under Justin Trudeau. First off, he's made it a cult of personality around him. Secondly, he has gone much further to the left. There was a woman who was caught on a hot mic back in 1968 as Pierre Trudeau was running for leader of the Liberal Party. A woman named Judy LaMarche, who was in the government of Pearson, and she was caught on mic saying about Pierre Trudeau, I'll paraphrase it because I can't use her salty language, "You've got to stay in the race, Paul. Can't let him win. He's not even a Liberal. He's a socialist." So, Pierre Trudeau was definitely on the socialist end. Justin Trudeau is. The fact that he recruited a guy who was, in my view, always a socialist to run for the Liberal Party and then made him environment minister, not a shock to me.
Brian, home prices are still quite high, and a new report says rent has increased by almost 10%. And now the Bank of Canada is warning that we may never see 1 or 2% interest rates ever again. The overnight rate, I believe, is currently sitting at 5%. Could we actually see more increases from the Bank of Canada?
They haven't ruled it out. They're talking about, we have to get used to interest rates remaining high. Deputy Governor Rogers was giving a speech in Vancouver late last week talking about this very thing, that rates are not going to be coming down anytime soon. And look, we're not going to go back to the rates that we enjoyed over the last, more than a decade. Those came about as a result of the economic crash of 2008, 2009. And then, they started to go up a little bit and then went down again to stimulate the economy due to the COVID-19 pandemic. Having the bank interest rate overnight of, a quarter of a percentage point, that's unheard of, especially over a prolonged period of time. It's a shock to many that they've gone up so quickly and it's hurting. But if they do go down, don't expect them to go back down to where they were. Could they go down to 3%? Sure. Could they go up, though, to 5.5%, 6%? That's possible as well. Tiff Macklem, the main Bank of Canada governor, hasn't ruled that out. And he's given a speech recently where he said government spending is part of the problem. Unemployment is going to be an issue. Government spending is going to be an issue. External factors are going to be issues. So it's up in the air. The only thing I can tell you is don't expect rates to come down anytime soon, but yes, they could go up.
A couple of my coworkers were telling me they have 3 years left on their mortgage at 1.99%. I just renewed a few months ago at 5.09%. Not being envious here, but I'm very happy for them. Brian, over the past few weeks, you've noted that the Trudeau government has taken to demanding that the Conservatives do their jobs as it relates to the idea of an Alberta-made pension plan. Now, with only 2 Liberal seats in Alberta, why are the Liberals campaigning in Parliament on this issue?
Yeah, well, they're trying to paint the Conservatives as not standing up against the Alberta pension plan. Now, of course, Conservative leader Pierre Poilievre has come out and said he's against the idea of an Alberta pension plan, and he would encourage Albertans to stay in the Canada pension plan. That is, pure politics, and so is what the Liberals are doing. It's pure politics. In the rest of the country, Alberta withdrawing from the Canada pension plan is not going to be seen as a popular idea. It's going to be seen as something that could hurt the pensions of the rest of the country. And so the Liberals are latching onto anything. We've talked about their polling numbers. They're not doing well. So yeah, they're going to lose those 2 seats in Alberta, but can they scare voters in other parts of the country that, if you vote for these Conservatives, look, they're going to rip up the Canada pension plan. Your pension's going to be at risk. I think that is a big part of it. They're the only core group that the Liberals still do pretty well on are people over 55, particularly women. And I would hazard a guess, we don't have the exact data on this, but I'm betting a lot of retired civil servants are in that group. That's more anecdotal than science-based. But so they're trying to appeal to that. They want to draw back more of those voters. And I don't know if you're watching NFL football over the weekend, Hal. I know you're not much of a sports fan, but I don't know about you, but I saw Pierre Poilievre ads about pensions running in the middle of the Sunday NFL game. Second weekend in a row, I've seen Conservative ads. And this time he's talking about protecting people's pensions because he knows that this is an attack the Liberals are going to use. So it's not about those 2 Alberta seats. It's about the seats in British Columbia, in Manitoba, in Ontario.
Brian, it appears as though the Trudeau government plans to move ahead with banning and confiscating thousands upon thousands of firearms. Has there been any movement on that front? I mean, many hunters, farmers, and sport shooters are quite concerned right now.
There hasn't been any official movement since they extended the exemption until October 2025. So, all those guns that they banned on May 1st, 2020, you're a criminal for having them in your gun safe, but they don't know how to get them out of your gun safe. So you're a criminal for doing it, but we're going to exempt you from the law. You just can't move them. You can't use them. You can't transfer them. It's quite something. But here is the thing. Lots of chatter about will they be doing this through regulation. Now, the Canadian Centre for Firearms Rights, they just lost a court case, federal court case. It wasn't Supreme Court, where they challenged the May 1st, 2020 order in council that brought all this about. They said that the government had overstepped their bounds, that they did not properly consult, that they should have been doing this through legislation. The court disagreed. Now, the CCFR is likely going to be appealing this, but I believe the government was waiting until after that court case to see, okay, do we need to go ahead with legislation, which got us in trouble last time, which caused a lot of headaches, or can we just simply do this through regulation, stroke of a pen at a cabinet meeting, and be done with it? That is what I am hearing from people in the industry, people in law enforcement, that there is going to be regulation coming down shortly to deal with a lot of what the federal government wants to do.
And speaking of the federal government, Brian, and the Trudeau Liberals, it seems like their popularity is plunging. We talked about it before with the polls, and a recent poll, I believe it was Nano, showed that the Liberals are almost in the NDP territory. The Conservatives over 40% of support, the Liberals 22%, and the NDP 20%. It's incredible, the drop with the Justin Trudeau Liberals right now.
And there, some polls would show them being nearly wiped out in BC, where they currently hold 15 seats. The other parties hold 13 each. They would be decimated in the suburbs around Toronto. They would lose they've got 78 seats in Ontario right now. The Abacus poll that just came out, the modeling done on that said that in total, the Liberals would win 69 seats across the country. Not their worst showing ever. I believe that was 2011 under Michael Ignatieff with 34 seats, but that would be a devastating loss if they were reduced to 69 seats. They've got 24 in Atlantic Canada, 78 here in Ontario, 30 odd seats in Quebec. You're talking about losing in Liberal heartland, not just the swing areas that, every region, every party has areas that they win and they lose and they trade back and forth. It's how we change governments. But you would be losing in Liberal heartland seats.
Wow. Brian, with the war continuing to rage on between Israel and Hamas in the Middle East, we're seeing kind of a spillover effect here in Canada. A couple of Jewish schools in Montreal were shot at. Molotov cocktail was launched at a synagogue in Montreal, and anti-Semitism appears rampant. Brian, the rallies in support of Hamas and Palestinians is growing here in our country.
Yeah, and I've heard about actual targeting of Jewish individuals, businesses, community centers in Calgary, in Vancouver, a flower shop in Ottawa, Langdon Flowers, that I used to use. I didn't know they had a connection to the Jewish community. It was buy flowers there, send them for funerals, for special occasions, all the time. They were robbed and ransacked because they supply a lot of these local synagogues with flowers for special occasions. Here in Toronto, there was a gentleman gentleman's a loose term here, on the weekend. It's supposedly a pro-Palestinian rally, but he turned it into a Hamas rally when he started to say, if you want your hostages back, you can have them back when you release all of our political prisoners. Yesterday, Hal, I interviewed 2 survivors of the October 7th terrorist attack from the kibbutz that was closest to the music festival. And it was heartbreaking listening to their stories, but they were also telling me that they're very disappointed what they're seeing here in Canada, that it is disturbing to them, and that people need to understand what happened. They don't want the war going on anymore either, but Hamas, they say, is the issue. And Hamas, they told me, is also the biggest oppressor of the Palestinian people in Gaza. They farm an area that goes right up to the border fence, and on their side, it's green, it's lush, they're growing everything. And on the Gaza Strip side, it's brown, it's dirt, there's nothing growing. And the difference is how the governments run things, how people are treated, and what the priorities are. And right now, the priority is terrorism from Hamas. And so the people in Canada that are coming out in support of Hamas And if you're at a rally where they're saying those things that I was just mentioning, you're at a Hamas rally, well, you're supporting a terrorist organization that oppresses its own people.
You know, I saw one of the videos as well of this one Muslim extremist leader who had a megaphone, and he was telling people that, you know, Allah will wipe out the Zionists, will kill all of the Jews. But where are the police in all of this? I mean, that's hateful speech coming out of this person's mouth.
And that guy is Adil Sharkawi, who was arrested and held on a security certificate for alleged ties to terrorism going back to the Chrétien government. It was 2001, 2002, he was arrested on a security certificate. And, you know, he's been a controversial figure for a long time. I don't understand why the police have not arrested him for what he said. Now, he claims, oh, I didn't say kill the Jews. I said, you know, and he said he didn't incite anyone to hate. He said he called for God to kill the Zionists. Well, you know, so he's not inciting people to hate. I'm sorry, you're calling for Allah to kill all the Zionists and the enemies of the people of Palestine. Wow. You are inciting people to hate just because you're invoking the name of God. That doesn't get you an out of jail free card. And because you're saying Zionists instead of Jews, I'm sorry, who are the Zionists? Well, 90% of Jews would say they're Zionists, I would say. So, yeah, I think he is pushing that. He's been denounced by every political figure in Quebec, I'm glad to say, but the police have not acted. And, you know, that's not the only incident where police should have acted and haven't.
Political reporter and Sun columnist Brian Lilley, thanks so much for joining us today from Toronto.
Thanks for having me.